As you were saying then about like substance use, it's something that may, that people may be familiar with, that certain celebrities or certain things they hear in the news or online about like people with ADHD. It might be a common thing they might hear about, but I know it's something very stigmatized in terms of like how it can affect neurodivergent people. And as I said, for those who also might be like correctly diagnosed with bipolar or other health conditions. So how was it? How did it take for you to learn that issues with addiction was linked to your ADHD?
I think it took me a while to figure out that was a big part of the reasons to why I was struggling with it so much. Obviously, there has recently been a lot of discussion in the media about substance abuse and issues of mental health, particularly with celebrities, and we do see it and we do talk about it, but there is still so much shame attached to it. And I think one of the really difficult things is being able to recognize when you're unable to moderate something. So, a lot of people, for example, go out to the pub every now and again, have a pint, and it's no big deal. And then there's other people who can't do that, and it's an everyday thing, or it might not even be an everyday thing. It can be the inability to moderate. People do have an idea in their head of what addiction looks like. And nobody really wants to apply that stigma and shame to themselves, which can prevent people from getting support in the first place. So I think for me, in terms of recognizing it was an issue for me, actually happened Christmas last year. I was having a really difficult time with it, and I started to think, oh, I'm not enjoying myself anymore. This isn't really helping me. This is actually making me really unwell. This doesn't feel good. And then I grappled with trying to stop at like the beginning of the year. That didn't work. And then the scenario that made me realize was I went into a situation that makes me quite stressed and out of my comfort zone. And I basically spiraled for about 7 weeks. And in that time, I'd actually been lying to my therapist saying, I'm not taking. Am I allowed to say what it was
Yeah,
that I
you
was?
can say,
Okay. Yeah. At that point, I've struggled with like various things over my life, but predominantly for me, it was is marijuana. That was the thing that really stayed the longest. It was the last thing really for me to be able to let go. And there are plenty of reasons why that particular substance is commonly used by people who are ADHD or neurodivergent. And it's because essentially what it does is it relaxes you. There are loads of other really negative side effects, but just talking about the reason I think why this is so problematic for people within our community is because it shuts your brain down. So if you've got a very rapid firing brain, you suffer with anxiety, that particular substance closes the curtains on your brain. You can relax, you can stop, you can sit still. However, it also makes your anxiety worse. It makes you depressed. I had this basically 7 week, I'm going to call it a relapse, although I hadn't really stopped properly before. But the reason I'm referring it in that way is because it basically was so bad that I was doing it all day, every day, non-stop. I couldn't wake up in the morning without thinking like I needed it in order to cope with my day, to be able to get up and function. And I wasn't functioning completely out of it. I wasn't getting anything done. I was sedating myself. But the sedation wasn't even helping. I was incredibly paranoid. I thought there was cameras watching me. It can almost mirror psychosis sometimes. And I was lying to my therapist at the time saying, yeah, I've quit, and masking that I was struggling so much. Anyway, the end of this 7 week period, I was basically in crisis with it, where the anxiety, the paranoia, the depression, my mental health was really at crisis point. And I had a call with my therapist and I said, I've lied. I've been struggling with it this whole time. She was aware it was a problem, had been saying like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I will never forget that call because she was so disappointed. I am so lucky. I have an amazing therapist. We have a great relationship. And she said to me, she said, I'm really disappointed. I feel like the trust between us is broken, that you've hidden this from me. And this had been an ongoing issue. And I had been aware that it was a problem. It was getting in the way of everything. I didn't want to socialize because I wanted to go home and do that. I didn't want to leave the house. It was everything in my life revolved around that, and it had just gotten progressively worse. So I was really hit by this sense of, I felt hurt. She didn't shame me. I didn't feel shamed by her. I felt hurt that I had broken the trust with my therapist, who is wonderful. And at that point, she said to me, I think this is really serious, and I think you need to go to meetings, which I had a bit of a mixed reaction to. On the one hand, we'd spoken about meetings before and I'd brushed it off and thought, yeah, that's not something that I need to do. So I was a bit like, oh, yeah, I don't know if meetings is the right place for me. Addiction meetings, I think that seems a bit extreme. Like, obviously, I'm not an addict or anything. But then on the other hand, I thought, Lydia, you're at a point where you can't stop. You can't stop, and it's getting worse and worse. You're lying to people. Your mental health is dreadful. Your money is just going entirely on this one thing. It's the only way you know how to connect with other people. It's the only way you know how to manage your mental health, quotation marks. And I think at that point, I realized that I was in a very toxic relationship with a substance that I was using as the only tool I really had to try and help myself. And it had essentially, the substance had turned on me and it was no longer helping me in the way it had before. I couldn't moderate it. And that was the point at which I was like, oh, I've been self-medicating here. This is a problem. And that's when everything turned around. At that point, I realized this is really bad.